Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to our Thursday morning Cosmic Coffee, coming to you live here from Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm Jeff Hall. I'm one of the astronomers and the director of the observatory. I'm here this morning with our librarian and archivist, Lauren Amundsen. First of all, we're going to do our usual quick shout out this week to Macy's Coffee House down on South Beaver, encouraging everyone to go out and support our local businesses as the economy gradually recovers. Now, last week on Cosmic Coffee, we gave you a behind the scenes tour of one of the oldest buildings on our campus, the Slifer Building, with our historian Kevin Schindler. If you were online for that or have watched it since, he took us all through the building, ending up in the plate vault down in the basement, where we still have one of the original Pluto discovery plates. This is one of the oldest and most historic buildings on campus. It's where I'm coming to you from here in my office at one end. Today, we're going to go to the other end and take you behind the scenes a little bit of one of the newest buildings on the campus, which is the Putnam Collection Center, which was dedicated only a few years ago. And Lauren, our librarian, is here to show you all of the ins and outs and a little bit about the archives and the tremendously long history of documents and artifacts that we have here at the observatory. So good morning, Lauren.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to do this today. My plan is to kind of give a behind the scenes tour of the archives, which not a lot of people get to see. And so I think, you guys, I hope you'll enjoy it. Just to start out, as Jeff said, the Putnam Collection Center is relatively new. It opened in 2014. So around 2010, staff realized that we were really quickly running out of space for our collections, and we needed to do something. We were storing them in basements, attics, really bad conditions, and we decided to start a fundraising campaign for a new collection center. And so we had a very successful campaign led by the previous archivist librarian, Antoinette Beiser. We raised $2.6 million, broke ground in 2013, and then this beautiful new building opened in 2014. And since then, we've been moving the collections from the other parts of campus into here. And so part of what I'm going to talk about today is just the process that we do for that. So I will turn my camera around here. There we go. So here we are in the library. The Lowell Library is a very small, specialized library. We are only open to our staff and volunteers. We concentrate mostly on astronomy and astrophysics. So you'll see that we've got, about 10,000 volumes of books. Bound journals. We still do get some print journals, although most of them are electronic now. And those of you of a certain age might appreciate the way that we check books out here, which is that we still have a card in the back where you put your name and you fill it out. And the reason for that is that our library is so small that it didn't really make sense to automate it. And so it's kind of fun and quirky, but we really do like it.
So yeah, that brings back the old days for sure.
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Oh, I haven't done that since junior high," but it works for us, so we keep it. So here in the library, we've just got kind of a little front desk area, a workspace, conference table at the back, where it's very popular pre-pandemic to meet back there. They're very busy. So a lot of people say libraries are changing, and I agree in some ways that they've become much more of a social space than they used to be. Gone are the days of shushing librarians. All right, so now we're going to head into the lobby. This is the only area of the collection center that is open to the public, and so twice a day, before the shutdown, we offered an open house. And so the public can come in, they can see our exhibits. This is kind of the highlight of the room. This is Big Red. So this is Percival Lowell's 1911 Stevens Duryea touring car. And this is a really cool story. So, Lowell bought this car. Actually, the back was modified, so it's a little bit wider than usual so that his wife, Constance, could sleep in the back when they took it out on camping trips, which is kind of cool. Lowell died in 1916, and in 1938, his widow, Constance, sold it to some friends in Santa Barbara. So it left on a train, went to Santa Barbara, and then nobody ever heard again for a long time. So right about 1990, there was a classic car show in Flagstaff, and the owner of this car came. He had no idea of the provenance of the car. He didn't know that it belonged to Percival. And by some serendipity and matching up a registration card out at the Pioneer Museum, they realized that this was Percival Lowell's car. And so our previous trustee, Bill Putnam, got very excited, and he actually purchased the car from the owner at the time, and it's been here ever since. This room was actually designed to hold Big Red. So it actually fits through these double doors here. We haven't driven it in a while, but it still gets out once in a while for maintenance and just to drive it around. So this is kind of the highlight. It's really fun to watch visitors come in here because a lot of them go crazy for the car and a lot of them could care less. So you kind of find out who the car people are. I'm not a car person, so I can't really speak to the mechanics of anything, but we've got the hood propped open here so you can kind of see the innards. This is really fun.
And just a very select, very small number of staff who actually know how to drive it too. It's quite a quirky thing to try to drive.
Yeah, definitely. There's just a few folks who know how to do it. I've never driven it, but I actually had a nightmare once that I did, and I drove it through the doors here. So, yikes. All right, so that's Big Red. Now we're going to swing around over here. So the other thing that we do here in the lobby is we have exhibits, and we try to rotate these through about every 2 years just to keep it fresh, come up with new ideas of things to highlight. So this one is the Lamplin Diaries. Carl Lamplin was an astronomer here from 1902 to 1951, so his entire career. And he kept a daily diary, and I'll kind of pan up here so you guys can see the diaries. I know we're getting a little bit of reflection, but just to kind of give you an idea. And so 2 years ago, we decided, you know what, we really need to digitize those diaries because they're written in pencil, they're very fragile. We want to get those digitized. So we did that, and then that kind of served as the basis for doing a whole exhibit. And so we decided to highlight Carl Lamplin's life, because I think he's definitely one of the lesser known astronomers here at Lowell. He did a lot of planetary photography. He did a lot of radiometry measurements of the planets, particularly Venus and Mars. So here we've got one of those observation logbooks. This is actually from 1933 when he was looking at Pluto. So what's cool is that the logbook matches up with this plate here. And then what's really neat is that the New Horizons mission actually used these plates. Mark Bowie, who used to work here, came over and he had these plates digitized, and then they used the data to get a better sense of Pluto's orbit for the New Horizons flyby in 2015. So it's really kind of a cool way to say that, hey, something that happened in 1933 was relevant today. So that was really exciting. We love these. These are lantern slides. So this is like the precursor to PowerPoint presentations, but these are just gorgeous pictures that Lamplin took, and I'll kind of zoom in here. We've got the moon. We got Comet Halley. These are just kind of visually stunning. We picked out the best ones we could. That's the Rhea Nebula. And so, like I said, Lamplin was a prominent photographer, astrophotographer. And so that was, we've got hundreds and hundreds of these lantern slides in our collections. A couple of pieces of the equipment that he used. Here's the radiometer. And I honestly couldn't tell you about what he was using this for. I'm not a science person, so if Jeff has any ideas about the radiometer thermocouple, but these were actually just locked away in a file cabinet in the Slifer basement, and we pulled them out for this exhibit. So it was good to get them out of there. Another logbook over here and some comet observations. So, you know, it's not a huge exhibit, but it's, you know, things that we like to highlight. And we also have a complimentary online exhibit that has a lot more material digitized. Maybe we can throw up a link to our online exhibits in the chats, because pre-pandemic, you know, we were doing this, but now we're really trying to do a lot more online exhibits so that people can see what we have, you know, since they can't come up in person.
Yeah, I've noted a couple of people on social media noting that link. So people have definitely noticed it, and I think it's great to see people enjoying it.
Great, thank you. This is just a small exhibit that we threw together back in February when we had the I Heart Pluto Festival. Just kind of wanted to highlight some items related to Pluto and Clyde. And then over here, this is an exhibit that we've had up for a couple of years. This is Lowell's Lunar Legacy. And the purpose of this exhibit was to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the first moon landing. So in 2019, we put together this exhibit. It highlights Lowell Observatory's role in the moon mission. So the mapping, so there was the Aeronautical Chart and Information Center, which was based out of St. Louis, but they had an office here in Flagstaff. And so they did a lot of moon mapping. Here's a photo of Pat Bridges, who worked here. We've got some of the airbrushes that they used for their work. A couple of moon globes, actually, that are kind of cool. Over here, we actually have a lunar meteorite. So this is a little piece of the moon. It's kind of cool. Up here, we've got some more. This was a hand lens that was carried on the moon on Apollo 15. And that was a recent donation that we got from the family of Gordon Swan. And then up here, just kind of some various memorabilia, coins, things like that. This is really cool. So this is 1963. The astronauts visited Northern Arizona to do training. And so these are their signatures in our guest book. This is actually a facsimile. We didn't want to put the real one out on display just for preservation reasons. But I'm looking for some names here. I see
Armstrong's in there, isn't it?
Armstrong, yep, I see an Armstrong.
Yep.
So yeah, so this is just kind of a really cool little piece of history that we have here in our collections. All right, so that's Lunar Legacy. Again, that also has an online exhibit. So if you're interested in, looking at more photos, documents, things like that, check it out. Now we'll head over here. So this is one of the coolest things we have. This is the spectrograph that VM Slifer used when he was doing his radial velocity studies of galaxies. Got a picture here of him using it. And again, I don't know, Jeff, if you want to say a little bit about kind of what VM was using this for when he had it on the Clark.
Sure, yeah, that could be mounted to the Clark telescope. And he was, at Percival Lowell's request, he was observing what at that point we called the so-called spiral nebulae. Of course, those were galaxies. We didn't know what they were at the time, back in 1912. And VM made the observation that the great majority of them were moving away from us at speeds much beyond what anyone expected and what you could explain from some local object near the sun. And that ultimately led to the Hubble law. Edwin Hubble took VM's data, added some of his own further observations, and basically deduced the expansion of the universe. And that all began that spectrograph right here in 1912 at Lowell Observatory, one of the fundamental observations, discoveries of the 20th century.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. It's in great shape. We're really excited that we still have this and that we're able to display this to the public. Thank you, Jeff. So up here we've got, this is also a highlight, and I'll kind of pan across. These are Percival Lowell's original hand-drawn Mars globes. And so if I can zoom in here, I'm too short, but he made one at every Mars opposition from 1894 until his death in 1916. So I think the last one was actually 1914-15. But he would make observations of Mars in his logbooks, and then he would take those observations and he would create these globes. And these are just fantastic. And the detail, as you get farther along, the first year there's not a lot, but by the third year he's naming features on the planet, and he's got polar caps and everything. So these are really cool. And then over here we have Percival's first telescope. His mom gave him this when he was 15. And so it's a 2 1/4 inch diameter lens. But there it is. That's what got him interested. And then the last thing I'm going to show you guys in the lobby, this is the Millionaire calculating machine. So before we had computers as we know them today, computers were people. And so they would use machines like this to do calculations. So here at Lowell, you may know that Percival Lowell was interested in searching for a trans-Neptunian planet out beyond Neptune that he called Planet X. And one of his computers was named Elizabeth Williams, and she did a lot of calculations for him using this machine. So that's the Millionaire. Any questions before I head on to the next section here?
Terry Pantano wants to know if I ever get to drive that car, and the answer is a resounding no. I would be a complete menace, I'm afraid.
I think most of us would be, so you're in good company there. All right, so now I'm going to head down the hall here to the back area where nobody really ever gets to see.
No, this is yeah.
Okay, so this is the reading room. When researchers come to use the archives, this is where they set up. It's adjacent to my office. There's a little window between us so that, I can keep an eye on people as they're working. Generally, we usually get about 3 to 5 researchers in person a year who come to use the collections. And then beyond that, probably about 50 requests for digital materials from filmmakers, authors, producers, journalists, everybody, who's just looking for material for whatever it is that they're working on. So this is the reading room. Also kind of doubles as an intern or a volunteer workspace on days when we're really crowded in here and need some more space to work. So that's the reading room. And then in here, this is our freezer room. So we have a 8x10 freezer, and the purpose of this is for pest control. So as we're bringing in collections from other areas on campus or items that people donate that maybe have been sitting in a storage container for 30 years, we want to make sure that we're not letting any pests migrate into the collections area. And so what we do is we check the boxes, we wrap everything in plastic to make sure that there's no condensation that forms on the boxes themselves. And then we put everything in the freezer for 2 weeks at minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can see we've got our thermostat there so we know where we're at. I'm going to open the door real quick. It's going to get loud a little bit. I tell you what, that feels really good on a 90-degree day.
Yeah, don't get trapped or anything. So
Trapped, yeah. There is a safety feature. You can pop out the door and escape, but I've never gotten trapped in there, thankfully. So normally the freezer would be full of boxes. With the shutdown, we haven't been able to do anything since March, which is unfortunate. We had to kind of just grind to a halt in terms of our project with that, but since 2014, we've continuously been moving materials over here, running them through the freezer, and then getting them back into the collections area. So, here's the door that goes out to our loading dock. I have a volunteer who works down in the Slifer basement. He's wrapping boxes and cataloging. Our wonderful grounds crew brings the boxes over, and then we load everything up into the freezer. We keep track on a spreadsheet and then also just in a Google Sheets database so that we can keep track of everything that we've run through here. And I think in February, we hit our 1,000th box, which was really exciting. So
how long do you have to leave them in there to sort of kill everything?
2 weeks is our standard. If we open it and see that there's any signs of an infestation, then we basically quarantine it for another 6 months just to make sure that there's nothing going on. But we really haven't had any trouble, and I attribute that to the climate here. I mean, we're very lucky. We have low humidity. If we were in Hawaii or Florida, you'd probably see a lot more issues with mold and water damage and that type of thing. So, considering that a lot of these materials were sitting in a basement for 100 years, they're in really good condition. So, all right, so that's sort of the receiving area / freezer. So after we get everything out of the freezer, we will head over here to what we call the processing room. And this room, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, as we're moving along, there was another question about the freezer. Since cockroaches love to lay eggs in cardboard, do eggs have a possibility of surviving the freezer, or does it pretty much take everything out?
It pretty much takes everything out. But again, we do double check just to make sure that if there's any signs, you could leave it in there longer. Sometimes we forget and we leave stuff in there for a month just because we just get busy and we forget it's in there. And, it can't hurt to have an extra blast of that. One thing I think is a common misconception is that you can kill mold, which you can't kill mold, you can deactivate it. And so if we find something with active mold, what we want to do is make sure that we get it to a point where it's deactivated and then get it into a climate where it won't reactivate. So, and another cool thing about the freezer is that, we're using it for pest control now, but say we had, water damage, if we had a leak or a flood and books got wet or papers got wet, we could get those in the freezer right away to, make sure that we inhibit that mold growth within the first 24 hours. So that's nice to have just sort of as a peace of mind kind of thing in case we had water damage. And then farther down the road, if we wanted to, we could use it as cold storage for film and photographs, because those can be stored at a much lower temperature. So possibly someday that's something we could do. All right, so processing room. So just kind of give you guys an idea, little workstation here, computer scanner. I have a team of about 10 volunteers, and these folks are just fantastic. They are doing so much for us in terms of cataloging, processing, digitization, very dedicated. It's been rough with the pandemic because they haven't been able to come in since March. But that's just kind of one of those things. So, when we do get to come back, that'll be great. But kind of just
couldn't do it without them. I mean, we have such a vast amount of stuff to process.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. There's 2 of us paid in the department, and then usually about 10 to 12 volunteers. So, I don't know. We'd be lost without them. So thank you if any of you are watching. Here's just kind of the shelf with their projects that they've been working on. just to give you guys an idea of kind of the vastness of what we're dealing with here. And then just a couple more, a lot of supplies. We love supplies. That's our favorite thing. We get really nerded out about getting a shipment of boxes and folders. It's pretty exciting. So, all right. So that's the processing area. And we're going to continue on to the repository. There's the most important piece of equipment in the building, the coffee machine. I'm going to leave my water out here so we don't take it into the collections area. And there we go. Okay, so here we are in the repository. So you can see our shelving. This room is climate controlled, so we keep it at 65 degrees and 45% relative humidity. We've got our system over here, but then I also keep a backup recorder here that goes straight to my phone so that if there's ever a spike in temperature or humidity, I know right away, which is really good to know. So for instance, in the monsoon, the humidity always spikes and I can kind of keep an eye on it and make sure that it doesn't get too high. So I'm going to talk a little bit. Let's start with this telescope here. So this is the 6-inch telescope that Andrew Douglas used when he came out to the Arizona Territory in 1894 to scout sites for an observatory for Percival Lowell. And Douglas actually carried this telescope with him, starting down in Tombstone, Arizona, way in the south, and working his way up north to Flagstaff. I have heard that the box that it was in was shaped somewhat like a coffin, which made some people sort of wary about transporting it. So that's kind of a fun thing. This actually used to be the finder scope on the Clark. And I think the last time it was used was in 2012 for the Venus transit. And so we set it up kind of up by the where the Baronial Mansion, the trustees' residence is today. And people actually got to look through it at the Venus transit, which was really cool. Personally, it's very special to me because it's the reason that I met my husband. Kevin Schindler, our historian, was doing an exhibit about 15 years ago about this telescope and Douglas's expedition to Arizona, and he needed a humanities consultant. And my husband teaches history, and so he was helping Kevin, and Kevin found out that my husband, Mike, plays softball for the Lowell Infra Red Sox, and I was also on the team, and he told me I had great footwork, and that was it. So I really like this telescope.
Very nice. And we are, to orient people, right behind that telescope, it looks like a wall, is actually, that's a drape that looks out into the lobby, right? So
yes.
People on the tours can look through that and see this telescope if and when you can come back to visit.
Yeah, that's really cool. But yeah, that shade goes up. And then people can peek back in here. And so that was another thing that they designed with that specifically in mind, was to have that set up as kind of a showpiece behind the glass for folks to look at.
Right.
Over here, we've got some artifacts. So in addition to paper, we've got what we call 3D objects. A lot of this stuff is just kind of pieces. Lowell has had an instrument shop on its campus since the very early days, and a lot of things were built here on site, and sort of, Frankenstein's to, hey, this is what we need, so let's build it. And so we've got a lot of that, a couple more Mars globes. This is one of my favorite things. It's a bottle of Pluto water. I don't know if you guys can read that, but Pluto water was a very popular laxative in the 1920s. And so in 1930, when Clyde Tombaugh discovered this new planet, they sort of said, well, people will associate Pluto with this laxative, and I don't really think that was a thing, but that's kind of fun. So I think that's probably one of my favorite objects that we have here.
Yeah, and actually one of my friends in the community several years ago, over there on my my shelf, I have a little jar of Pluto powder, again from the 1920s. So if it's ever a particularly rough day, I can mix that into a little water and take those.
Yeah, well, you know where to find the water, so come on over.
Yep. Right.
All right, so let's see. I pulled some items just to kind of give you guys an idea of what we have in our collection. So this is Percival's hat and his camera, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
This is his engraved whiskey flask. And then this is one of his logbooks with his Mars observations. So we have dozens of these. You can kind of see that, they're a little bit fragile. So we've actually digitized all of these. They're available, freely accessible online if you're interested in looking at more of that. But these were often, he would do the observations and then he would take the notes and use that as the basis for his globes. All right, over here, a few more things. So this is the original telegram suggesting the name Pluto for the new planet, March 16th, 1930. And I don't know if you guys can read it, but it says, naming new planet, please consider Pluto, suggested by small girl. And it's actually Venetia Burney, but they totally butchered her name and wrote Vebsha Nurni for dark, gloomy planet. So this is a great piece of history right here. They actually received quite a few suggestions of the name Pluto, but they determined that Venetia's was the first. And so that's why she gets the credit for naming the planet. Some other items, a handwritten manuscript by Percival. This is actually about Mars canals, which we all know is fairly controversial. Mm-hmm. We have a couple of letters signed by Albert Einstein. I think I can scooch in here. These are always a favorite when people come to visit to see these. And those are digitized and online as well. So a lot of this stuff, you can check it out later. This is a scrapbook. This was Percival Lowell's secretary, Rexy Leonard. And she kept about 3 scrapbooks that we have in our collections. And these are just fun, little pieces of fabric and some tickets from a show that she went to. Those are digitized as well. This is kind of cool. I just found this a few weeks ago, actually. This is the itinerary for Percival Lowell's last lecture tour. He didn't know it was his last one. This is the fall of 1916. But you can kind of see some of the dates and his travels as he was going around talking about his research. And then his last lecture, or his last observation notes, November 11th, 1916. He died November 12th. So this is the last thing he did.
Yeah, Laura, I was going to mention that very one because we only turned that up recently. One of our volunteers, as we're starting to look through all of these artifacts that are just sitting all over the campus. And here's, the very last page of observations. I think he was observing one of the moons of Jupiter. And yeah, the handwriting just ends. And that's the end of a major figure in our history and scientific history.
Yeah, that was a really cool find. I think it was in a bottom of a cigar box or something in the basement, and had been tucked away there for decades. So
right, basically where Kevin finished up last week down there under the rotunda. I think that's right. It turned up just sitting in a box down there.
Yeah, and that's one of the coolest parts of this job is that you just never know what you're going to find. Right. So that was really fun. This I pulled out because I wanted to talk briefly about electronic records. And one of the biggest challenges that archivists face is, more and more we are acquiring records in born digital formats. So photos that people take with, their phone or a digital camera or email or anything, that you do in Google Drive. I mean, those are all born digital. And with paper, it's easy because we know how to preserve it. We know how to take care of it. We know how to make it accessible. But it's really difficult to know, okay, 5, 10, 20 years from now, are the formats that we're using going to be around? Are they going to be readable? And so it's a huge challenge for archivists to try to figure out, okay, what do we have? How do we make sure that this is still available, still accessible in the future? Because if we don't stay on top of that, we're going to lose an entire section of the historical record, which is a huge shame. And so that's something that actually with the pandemic has been kind of good for us. My colleague Stacy and I have been going through all of our digital records and figuring out, okay, what do we have? What formats are they in? Are they still readable? What do we need to do to migrate them to ensure that we are, going forward, making sure that this is available for the historians of the future. When Jeff retires, he'll probably just hand over a flash drive of files and say, good luck, here's my stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's literally true. I think, if you turn around, I know that you've got just shelf after shelf there of, our former director, Bob Millis's papers are all in there, and, just shelf feet of them. And, you can see in my background, there's still a couple of filing cabinets there, but I never open them, and all of my correspondence the last 10 years was right here, and it literally would fit on a flash drive. So, I'll try not to lose it before I hand it off to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Jeff is right. It's going to be very different. And so that's something that, I think we all need to prepare for in terms of making sure that we have that evidence, because we don't want to look back and say, well, hey, we don't have any history about Lowell Observatory after, the year 2015, 2020. It's like, you don't want it to just stop. And so, I encourage, whenever I talk to our faculty members, hey, think about your legacy. Think about, what you want the people 50, 100 years from now to know about the research that you're doing today. I think that's very important, that we want to continue to make sure that, Lowell Observatory's history is represented well beyond, today. So how am I doing on time?
We're getting up towards the end of the time, and I think we've kind of toured the whole building here.
Yeah, so I'll just do one more thing. So, these are our great mobile compact shelving, and so we can cram a lot of stuff in here, which is just really nice. So real quick, I'll show you. This is what an unprocessed collection looks like. So these are the papers of Dr. Ted Bowl. Mm-hmm. He retired, about 10 years ago now. And all of his papers ended up in a garage. I actually had to wear a respirator when I went in and got it out, because it was just full of who knows what. And that was really scary. And if you can see, we've actually still got some of them wrapped in plastic, check carefully. Those were the ones that were really bad. Mm-hmm. But this is generally when we receive a collection from either, a retiring astronomer or staff member, or maybe it's somebody outside of the organization who, like a board member who wants us to have their papers. This is generally what it looks like. You'll have bankers boxes with stuff like that, the writing on them. And then what we do is we go through and we do an inventory. We weed out materials, anything like preprints, reprints, anything that can be found online that's not, this primary source material that you can only find here. We weed that out. Then we go back through and reprocess. We get everything into nice, you can see these are our archival boxes and folders. We want to make sure we're using acid-free. We label everything, we put it into series, and then we catalog it. And the purpose of all that, obviously, is access. So we want to collect, preserve, and provide access. Those are the three big things. So, we get the collection. Once we get it completely processed, we do what we call a finding aid, which is basically just the catalog, so that if a researcher comes in and says, hey, I want to know everything that Ted Bowl did about asteroids, boom, they can go right to it. So you kind of go from this to this, as Jeff was talking about. This is our previous director, Bob Millis, his papers. And so everything ends up just looking very nice and tidy. So we like that.
Yeah, it looks great. And those shelves are actually on rails. So they
They turn, yeah. So this is really cool. So,
Yeah.
and this is fun when kids come in here because you have them turn the thing and they're just really excited about how strong they are. So
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks. We do have one more question. It's sort of a question of space. How are we doing on space? Jonathan Ford asked if there are plans to expand the archive facilities in the future, or have we got room to spare here?
We have room. So when we were planning this building, we made sure that we had room, planning for growth. And I'm hoping that by the time we run out of space, I can retire and not have to worry about it anymore. One of the things, I think Kevin talked about the other day was our plate digitization project. And so once we have scanned those plates down in the Slifer basement, we will move them over here. So you can see that we've already got a few collections over here, but those will eventually all come over here. And actually the shelves are really cool. They have specially designed vertical slots for the plates to go into. So that'll be a big project, but we're excited about it. It's a never-ending job. I mean, you're never going to get ahead, but that's kind of what makes it fun.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Lauren. And it certainly is. It's great to see everything getting into one properly controlled space because, yeah, as we pointed out before with, like Lowell's logbook, there are things here that are simply priceless. I mean, you can't put a value on the final observing record of Percival Lowell. So so thanks so much for all your work and of course also to our volunteers for keeping all of this moving along.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't do it without you guys. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Jeff, for the opportunity to do this today.
Sure thing. Really, really a pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed getting another little behind the scenes look at some of the spaces here at Lowell you don't ordinarily get to see. So we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay safe and well and have a great weekend. See you next week.